by the Skillman Foundation.
Schools are where we build our future. But what is the future of schools? Meet the educator creating engaging classrooms. Meet the parent advocating for kids to feel safe and supported. Meet the young leader with innovative ideas. Meet the policy mover listening to all these voices. When people power education, we all move forward. Meet 10 education changemakers at skillmanvisionary.org.
Please welcome the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Skillman Foundation, Angelique Power.
Good morning. In this hour at the Mackinac Policy Conference, we are going to attempt to do a couple things, some very ordinary and some a little extraordinary, if I do say so myself. We're going to talk about K through 12 education. And this is a critical and important topic. I don't know if you read Chad Livengood's Detroit News op-ed, but he talked about how K through 12 is so important, and we're not really talking about it a lot in the conference. Well, we are here, and also at 5 o'clock, there is another panel that Balmer is hosting about K through 12. So there are spaces where we are trying to tackle what arguably is one of the most important things for Michigan to be discussing. But talking about K through 12 education, if you know Skillman Foundation, you know that we are obsessed with how we can make our education systems work well for young people. We talk about these things. We like to make education change with young people and for young people. So that's pretty ordinary. In terms of the extraordinary, we are doing this today with two incredible senators. They are from different parts of Michigan. They are from different sides of the aisle. Both have spent their careers trying to change the game for young people, and both have done some pretty incredible things to date for education. The other thing that makes this extraordinary, besides the fact that we don't have youth on the stage this year for the first time, but hold on, we do have young people that are going to be broadcast in to help me moderate this conversation. But the other thing that makes it extraordinary is that we're going to offer something in this hour that you don't see as much in the country today. Instead of polarized rhetoric, we are going to have substantive exchange. Rather than snappy sound bites, we're aiming for solutions that can work. So this hour, we're going to look at what is really a moment of massive disruption in the country. And we're going to ask ourselves, how can it be a portal to get to something different? Why do this? Because at the end of the day, we know that people power education. Education success rates are really based on different parts of an education ecosystem. It involves students, teachers, administrators, after-school and out-of-school time providers. It involves families. It involves business. It involves nonprofits and charitable foundations. It also involves policymakers who set the rules, regulations, allocate resources, and help us to build a public education system. Any system that needs to function, these separate parts need to function in partnership with each other. When they are in friction or when they are polarized, the gears of the system grind to a halt and stalls. Has Michigan stalled? We are 41st in the country for education. The only way up is to do this together. At the Skillman Foundation, we know that Michigan can do this, not in spite of being a purple state, but because we are a purple state. We are small towns, we are bustling cities, we are nature and culture, we are red and blue sometimes at once. We are cell phones that...
And loud.
We are counties that flip. We are leaders that shift. And we tend to reject the idea that a shouting match changes people's lives. We want to get things done for our families, for our neighbors, and then we actually want to go about our day. So because of who we are and because of the challenges that we see in Detroit, and we know those mirror the challenges that we see in the UP, we understand that working together isn't a compromise. It's necessary, and it's actually how we move things to the finish line. Today, we'll hear from two state senators, a Democrat and a Republican, and we'll hear what policymakers have planned to renew our K-12 education system. We'll also hear from Michigan students who'll share what the pressing issues are for them and the questions that they want to pose to our leaders. Michigan's education system needs every single one of us to work in concert, doing what's best for our children and youth. That starts with listening to young people, and it ends with building alongside of them. So let's dive into our panel.
Joining Angelique Power on stage, please welcome Michigan Senator Darrin Camilleri and Michigan Senator Ed McBroom.
Thank you both for joining me today to talk about the future of education. Senator Darrin Camilleri is a Democrat representing communities downriver of Detroit, and Senator Ed McBroom is a Republican representing the Upper Peninsula. And usually we say these things to signal a difference in who people are. But this session is about common ground, so I'm going to start with sharing a few things that they both have in common. Senators Camilleri and McBroom both have served 3 terms in the State House of Representatives, and then they both were then elected to the Senate. They both are fathers. Senator McBroom raised 5 children of his own and helped his late brother's 8 children to be raised. 7 of the kids are still at home with him, and 1 is graduating from high school this week.
All right.
Senator Camilleri and his wife welcomed a baby just 3 months ago. I have a 15-year-old who was a baby, but this is one of the cutest babies I've ever seen. So throughout the conference, please ask Senator Camilleri to pull out his phone.
I'll show you. I will.
One of the coolest things is that they both actually have studied education and they have teaching degrees. They both have also spent time in the classroom. And this is such a difference maker to actually have people who have experience in the classroom with young people at the policymaking table. I want to share that my mother was a public school teacher. My father was a police officer. And I learned from that being in public service is a life of dignity, and it is mission-driven, and it's so hard. You are often underappreciated. There's so much work that happens behind the scenes. And I know from our dinner table conversations, there were so many ideas of how to actually make these systems work better because you have a visceral knowledge of what's working and what's not. So I want to start by asking both of you, why did you decide to become a teacher? And then how do you carry that knowledge with you to the policymaking table? Senator Camilleri, do you want to start?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me, and thank you all for being part of this discussion. It does take all of us to be part of the decision-making table. We push the buttons, but you all help influence those discussions every day, so thank you for that. My journey to becoming a teacher was not exactly as I expected. It wasn't what I went into college thinking 100% that I was going to do, but I had several education experiences where I was working with young kids that basically led me to that pathway. First, I did a service learning project where we taught youth in the Kalamazoo Juvenile Detention Facility, Othello. And you would think that that is probably like an impossible task. Any high school kid, any teenager teaching Othello is hard enough, but then dealing with students who have a lot of challenges in their life and had been, receiving some of those really different interventions, right, in their life. But we did, and it was my class, and we worked with a couple of kids who had never enjoyed school. And one of the things that we learned from that experience was doing one-on-one programming, helping kids see, something that they would not have envisioned for themselves, and then turn it into something that they could live with. So we basically helped them adapt Othello into their own version of the play. And at the end of the program, they didn't perform it, but they said it out loud, and it was like a big performance, right? One of the kids that we worked with, his mom came up to me and my partner in the group and said this was the first time that he's ever spoken out loud in public. He's worked with dozens of college kids all his career. He's been in and out of various places like this. Thank you. You guys made an impact on him. So that kind of opened up my eyes. I then studied in Ecuador for my study abroad experience, and I worked with kids in an after-school program and taught them English. That was like another experience, like maybe I should do something with this pathway that I'm taking. And then the third was actually while I was helping out a candidate for state rep, I ran into a kid. I was working in the Flint area. I was helping out my friend Eli Segeri, who's running for state rep back in like 2013. And it was a special election, not a lot of things happening at that time, so I went up and helped. I was still in school, so a lot of people said, hey, why don't you go help this guy out? I like politics. I wanted to help out in whatever way I could. I ran into this kid. His name is Tyrius Malik Peoples. I'll never forget him. He was 10 years old, and I was knocking on doors, helping my friend Eli hopefully win his primary. And I was going door to door. Eli had a picture of him and President Obama on the piece of literature. So this kid comes up to me on his skateboard, and he says, hey, what are you doing in my neighborhood? I said, oh, well, I'm helping my friend run for office. He's like, well, I patrol the neighborhood, so I need to know who you are. And I was like, oh, wow, this kid's like, he's out there. But it's because he wanted to keep his neighborhood safe. He wanted to be a police officer when he grew up. And so I started to get to know him, and he took me door to door. He like literally walked with me. He's like, oh, my aunt lives over here. My cousin lives down the street. I'll take you with me through the neighborhood. And as I was getting to know him, he told me the story about how he gets bullied at school because he gets good grades, how he didn't know which school he was going to go to in the fall because his school was going to get shut down. And when I put all these threads together of these three experiences that I had with kids who just wanted to have a good life, it really just opened up my eyes that I needed to do more. And so I joined the Teach for America program, got to teach in Southwest Detroit in the neighborhood where my family's story began, right here in Michigan, and the rest is history. So here we are.
Thank you. Thank you. Senator McBroom.
I think similar to Darrin's, I probably have a longer story. I'll try to make it shorter, but what you didn't find out in my introduction is I have a dairy farm. I grew up dairy farming. We milk about 120 cows, and I wanted to continue that because I believe the farm was the best place to raise a family, and that was something I wanted. So I looked out there for career paths that would allow me to stay on the farm, because I already had a brother on the farm who told me there wasn't room for me unless I brought in outside income. So I liked school. I was a real nerd. Loved going to classes and learning things, especially history and social studies and sciences and music. And so it seemed like teaching was a great opportunity to continue to pursue things that I really enjoyed, along with also having time flexibility to be on the farm, especially in the summertime. And I could milk cows in the morning because school doesn't start till after 4. So it seemed like a good fit. And, as I finished high school, certainly really became much more cognitively aware of the impact teachers were making on my life and how much I admired some of them. I went on to Northern, studied social studies because it was a coast for me. Social studies was just not challenging. And because I had all that free time, because I wasn't milking cows twice a day anymore, I got involved with music. I was already a piano player, but I joined the band. And within a couple of years, I was sucked into the world of music, which was much more challenging for me, very difficult, but I double majored with a music education degree and thought it was going to be a band teacher by day and a farmer by night. My brother had quit the farm by then, so then suddenly there was more opening on the farm. And so I was waiting for a full-time band director position to open up near to the farm. And I got sucked into politics, which I was also interested in, like Darrin mentioned himself. And so I had that dream that someday I might run for something, but never thought it would happen in my 20s. And so I did a lot of subbing and teaching for 5 years, and then got sucked into this world. And you know, when you have been on the teaching side and then you get on the policy making side, it really matures your perspective and your philosophy of education far beyond what it was when you were a freshman in college, just saying, I just want to share a lifelong love of learning with beautiful young minds. I don't know how many times I wrote something to that effect. Once you've had this job and been in the classroom, then you really develop, like, what does it mean to be a teacher? How do we educate? How do students learn? How do we deliver that? And so I'm excited to get a chance to talk about that today.
Can I also share, in our planning call, you said, I'm not running for re-election again. So I have some things to say, right? So that's just a little teaser.
No varnish
there's also,
necessary.
there's seats available. So I see lots of folks sitting in back. There's a ton of seats. Just come on in and take a seat. Okay, I want to hear from a young person. We spoke to a high school student in Grand Blanc, Michigan, who's working with her local legislator to create a program that would allow young people on school boards. Let's roll the video.
Hi, my name is Gia Patel. I'm from Grand Blanc, where I'm a senior at Grand Blanc High School. I'm very passionate about civics and civic engagement, and this summer I'm actually conducting research on the disparities between civic education in high schools and how that has an impact on youth civic identity. And a little more closer to home, I'm actually working to propose a bill, a statewide bill for youth to be on school boards. And that leads me to my question: how are you engaging with and listening to youth voices regarding education?
That's right. Who wants to answer Gia first?
I'll start. So this has been one of my core philosophies as a legislator, is that I have to stay connected to the kids. And for me to be somebody who, I go to my classrooms all the time, all across my district. I listen to students, listen to educators, and I've never really left, right? I may not be teaching in front of the kids anymore, but I visit all the time and we talk to them. One of the other things that I do is we bring youth into the campaign and the legislative world. And so I've always had interns and people who work on helping us execute the vision. And so having kids be part of this, civic education in a real way is something that I know I would have benefited from when I was 16 years old. And obviously I did pretty well. I made it to be a state senator. But I think that there's a lot of these kids that we're working with today who I think can now envision themselves becoming elected officials. And that's because we bring them into the work.
Well, I remember when I was, I think in 8th grade, my school started putting a student on the school board. And I think that's any school that isn't already doing something to have a student representative on their school board is really missing a exceptionally important opportunity. So I would strongly encourage schools to already be doing that. As far as how do I stay in touch, well, for one, I've got 5 teenagers. One in college already and another one about to start. And so we hear a lot of that. And then, as Darrin mentioned, I visit area schools as often as they'll call me and invite me in. It's been interesting since COVID. Those invitations have been a little bit slower than they used to be. It's kind of like during the shutdown, they forgot about us, and it's been slow to come back around to inviting legislators into schools, but I still keep good relationships with a number of student groups. I'm very involved with our local 4-H clubs. I direct the Norway City Band and go out and recruit students to come and play at the City Band. I'm involved with Northern's teacher ed program. A good friend of mine is the director up there of that, and we get to go in and sometimes do the mock interviews with student teachers. And so there's just a lot of different ways to talk about it. And for me, one of the most important things is hearing from those who are just starting college or getting out of college to kind of get that feedback. Where did high school prepare you well, and where didn't it prepare you well to go on to this? And I, as Darrin knows, a big supporter of career tech education. That's been something that's been very important to me during my time. and visiting tech centers and seeing what's going on at our community colleges where they're teaching kids these skills to enter the workforce, I think is also really critical.
I just want to lift Gia's idea. In DPSCD, there are seats. There are students that are on the school board. I think the next thing is ensuring that they have a vote on those boards, which doesn't always happen. I want to talk school funding, and Senator McBroom, I'm going to stay with you on this one. I know you both have made this a driving issue, providing additional dollars, especially where the need is greater. How have you seen students thrive with more funding?
Well, I mean, one of the things I was just talking about when it comes to career tech education, as the merit curriculum was implemented after 2004 in this state and really pigeonholed every student into the exact same cookie cutter outcome for education, the funding started to diminish for the career tech side of things because a lot of those classrooms, how much funding they got depended on how much enrollment they had the year before. And so as we started to really strangle our career tech programs, we saw less and less offerings, less and less dollars going that way. And so over the last really 13 years or so of my time in the legislature, you've seen a lot of special enhancements and attempts to provide more resources for the career tech centers, the skilled trades, working with our great labor unions to help them teach skilled trades. Seeing what the community colleges can do. So a lot of that investment is things that I've been very pleased to support. And then, of course, I see the outcomes of additional dollars for other programming as well, especially what we've been able to do for bringing the highest per pupil and the lowest closer together as we've caught them up. That's been something that's been really important. And we started working on closing that gap when I started in 2011, and we've managed to close it here in the last 3 years, I think it finally closed. So that's a tremendous accomplishment considering that we started with that in 1994 with Proposal A. So in less than 30 years, we had closed that gap, and that's a really significant accomplishment. It's too bad it took 30 years, but still it's really great looking back at the history of where we've been.
Senator Camilleri, you talked about the Opportunity Index in the past. Can you explain what that is and why it's important?
Yes. So one of our crowning jewels in the last 2 years of our budget is something that we implemented called the Opportunity Index. Shout out to a lot of, I think, you in the room who've been pushing for this for a long time. And effectively, it takes the at-risk funding, but it puts it through a lens and a formula that shifts the funding to the greatest need. So school districts that have the highest need and the highest levels of poverty receive more money than those that have smaller amounts of poverty. And so shifting that focus essentially gives schools like Flint Public Schools and Detroit Public Schools and the charter schools as well so many more resources to help close the funding gaps. And I want to be clear, it's not just urban schools, right? These are rural school districts across the state that have transportation funding issues, special education funding issues, and all kinds of other challenges too. And this puts them through that lens as well. And so not only did we create the lens, but we also funded it to historic levels. And so the budget that we passed out of the state Senate this past week puts another $250 million more dollars in this formula. I hope that we can get it done. It's a 25% increase and puts us at $1.3 billion in funding for the Opportunity Index. That's something that levels the playing field.
That's a big
Got some supporters over here. It levels the playing field, and it's not perfect. We need so much more money in this formula to really fix the problem, but it sets a standard and puts goals in our budget to actually do it. And so this weighted funding is how we're seeing some of the best run states like Massachusetts. This is how they fund their program, and they have much better educational outcomes because of it.
I want to roll another video from Brandon Hoffmeister of Bay City.
Hi, my name is Brandon, and I'm a student at the University of Michigan, originally from Bay City, Michigan. I see throughout high school that we learn things like calculus, but not tangible skills like what is a loan or personal finance management or how to pursue post-grad opportunities outside of the usual college route. How can we make sure a Michigan education provides students with the proper resources for various post-grad paths?
Do you want to take that, Senator? I know you feel strongly
Well,
about it.
this has been a passion of mine.
Yeah.
I was finishing my education degree at Northern when the merit curriculum passed. And as somebody who came from a small town school in the UP where they had a college preparatory coursework and a tech prep coursework to graduate, it was really difficult to understand why the legislature was even passing this, because what was the problem we were trying to address? And, you know, as I've gotten involved in Lansing and policymaking, I discovered there were problems in other places with how that freedom at the local level was being abused. Because prior to that, the only two state requirements were a year of Phi Ed and a semester of government. After that, it was totally up to your local school district what classes were being studied, and that was being abused. Unfortunately, the legislature, in my opinion, overstepped by a long way by creating this huge, here's the classwork everybody should accomplish, and directed so many students away from the skilled trades. Even at the time, the governor at the time said, you know, the future is with college education. The future is 4-year or greater degrees. And I think by 2010, we were really starting to see that was going to create a huge problem. A huge labor shortage in the skilled trades was one of those outcomes. Certainly in the agriculture world, it was wreaking havoc for us. And so, you know, I look out there and see the merit curriculum as kind of the turning point for Michigan, going down a bad one-size-fits-all path. And a big part of that is the presumption that a top-down, centralized, overarching direction of what happens at the local level for local students' aptitudes and local professional teachers' expertise is totally lost by Lansing saying, here's what you have to do. And so my solution to these is continually to say, Lansing should be much more about setting some goals, about setting overarching goals of graduation, of people being able to read, people being able to get jobs, rather than telling them, oh, and you have to take Algebra 2, and you have to take chemistry, and you have to take 2 years of foreign language, and 1 year of the arts. I mean, this is just down on the ground level where the teachers and the principal and the parents and the students, they should be the ones directing that education at that level. And so I'm all for doing away with this centralized control of the nitty-gritty and giving much more general control at the top level, more direction to the schools on the goal setting and less on how they get there, and letting the local community drive that. Do we want a school that's focused on the arts? Do we want a school focused on the sciences? That should be a decision for the local school board and the local community, and work with the students and the parents for what their dreams are and what their opportunities are.
So you opened the door on Lansing, so I'm going to just step through it. You know, we've talked about how Michigan is 41st in the nation.
Hasn't gotten better.
Hasn't gotten better, and this is a decline that's happened over 2 decades. We've seen silver bullet solutions be offered. What you were just talking about had to do with what Lansing is responsible for, and then what happens and moves out. So as opposed to the silver bullet solution myth, which I think is driven by politics and wanting to say,
absolutely,
like, here's the thing we're going to do, and we'll put money behind it, and then here's the, you know, small gain. What needs to happen in Lansing? This isn't one of our prepared questions. What needs to happen? What needs to happen in Lansing that will allow for others to then customize the approach? And I'm going to ask both of you this question.
You want me to go first?
Sure, you first.
Oh. So I think we need more trust of our local communities. We need more trust to our local professionals. We could do some more at Lansing to direct the credentialing of our superintendents and our principals to make sure we're getting quality people administering our schools. But we need to empower the locals more, with more opportunity, more freedom, by giving them some clear directives of what to accomplish. We also need to stop changing the rules so often. It's just constant turnover and turmoil. As a teacher, I mean, it's just so frustrating. It's like one year you're going to get points because you have better posters on the wall. I mean, that's how dumb some of the teacher evaluation has gotten. It's what posters you put on the wall and what color pants you wear. I mean, teachers are seriously being evaluated on that kind of idiocy. And so we need less turmoil from Lansing, more good guidance, and less like get down in the nitty-gritty details that we can't govern. We don't know what that local community needs different from the next local community over. That's why we have local people there. And so we need a more stable Board of Education, a less partisan Board of Education. I've introduced legislation time and time again to change the way, because right now the party convention process is just terrible for creating a stable state Board of Education. And as long as the State Board of Education is in this turmoil of partisan politics, the legislature is going to involve itself into it. We need a more stable school board so the legislature can trust them, take a step back, let things go forward. We need to trust our state superintendent, which means we need a school board we can trust to appoint that state superintendent.
I'm going to take a slightly different approach. We have too many school districts in Michigan. And
I agree with that. That's part of what I'm saying too.
And I believe in a both and, right? So I think we can give local control with parameters and guideposts. We cannot switch them often, but having total local control also isn't in the state's best interest. I believe in locals making decisions, but we've got to give, again, these guiding posts of where we all want to be.
Yeah.
And in order to meet better standardized testing and be prepared for college and career, all of these things have to be with a vision in mind. And we as stakeholders in Lansing and policymakers in Lansing, we need to be empowered and feel comfortable with setting that direction and do so in a collaborative way. So I think to launch Michigan, right? So we're talking a lot about the Michigan Education Guarantee. And it's something that people on both sides of the aisle, business and labor, policymakers, as well as folks in this room, are talking about setting, again, those standards of what we should all be aiming towards so that we can then fulfill some of these promises and gain what we need to gain. So yes, I'm not saying no local control, but when you have 1,600 people, plus boards, plus superintendent, all these different people in the room, it makes it challenging, to say the least.
Well, since I'm not up for re-election, I'll even say, I agree that we have too many school districts.
Yeah.
And I agree that our system is very clunky at times. I like the decentralized nature, but you can look to what some other states are doing where they've kind of split the baby, where you have you have multiple schools, but you have a more centralized within the local region through counties.
Yes, we don't have to get rid of the high schools and the mascots. I know that that's the problem, right? We don't have to do that. But you can create systems that make sense, right? They're efficient. You've got one superintendent over multiple jurisdictions or county level, right? That people can then direct some of these smaller school districts. There are ways to do it.
Right, and part of, I think, what's been ebbing away and nibbling away for the rural area. I can't say for the urban area, so don't take that. I'm making an urbanized statement, but for the rural area, school choice functions very much to harm local schools' ability to make wise decisions. Because when a local school decides, hey, we have these important programs, but we need some money, so we're going to not have tennis this year, not have golf this year, and 5 students walk in and say, we're moving to this other school, well, you just lost all the money you thought you saved. And so when we've allowed school choice, at least in the rural community, I don't know everywhere else, but in the rural community to be abused in a way that it was never intended for, and it's harming a school's ability to make wise decisions. But I'll also say, as much as I think we have too many districts and there's lots of room for consolidation, I don't think consolidation is the silver bullet either, especially because you can get too big in your consolidation. In my opinion, some of the districts in this state are too large and they've become, the members of the school board represent more people than I do. And I know how difficult it is to do my job. So great school boards are school boards where everybody knows their members and bumps into them at the grocery store or out at church or in town and can communicate with them on that neighbor basis. And so I think we have too many, but I also don't want to see us make them too big either.
Yeah.
I am throwing my questions away now since y'all are just taking us in a new direction. I'm wondering, what is your prediction of what's going to happen? We have so much disruption on the federal level with the Department of Education going away or, being kneecapped and the title dollars rolling back differently. How do we actually approach this? Michigan is proudly purple. We do things very differently. We do have bipartisan ideas that are strong. What's it going to take to make this a moment where we sort of move forward, not mimicking what's happening at the federal level, but actually with like some of our solid bipartisan ideas? First of all, is that possible? And second of all, if so, how do we do it?
It's of course possible, right? But you just need to have willing partners in both chambers who are willing to sit down and get something done. The Senate has passed a budget. We're ready to figure out the final stages of what a budget looks like that we can send to the governor's desk. We have no budget from the House, or the budget that they've sent is just not one that they even call a real budget. Well, and I'd hope so, because it's a $5 billion cut to programs. When we have funding in our school aid budget, there is money. We actually have a good amount of money to spend back to our local school districts. So, I mean, we're ready. And so it just really takes somebody to reach out their hand and say, let's have a discussion. We've been doing that. This has been a much slower process than normal. Typically, we see the House will be moving their budgets at the same time as the Senate, and hopefully we can get to a product by July 1st, which is the law. So I hope that we can still meet that deadline. But we are in uncharted territory. I mean, I don't have a good answer on that front, because we still do have the chaos out of DC where we don't have a final budget from them. What are they attempting to cut? And then how does that have the impact on our budgets here at the local level? Again, we do not have to cut funding to schools in Michigan. We have a surplus in the school aid fund. This should be, in my opinion, something that we can all work on together. I don't know that we've seen that just yet, unfortunately.
Senator McBroom.
Well, I guess I would say I don't really feel like we're in uncharted territory if you go back far enough. So if you go back prior to 15 years, we're back to split control of the legislature. And so anybody who's been involved with education and funding and stuff knows this isn't uncharted territory. And we've had chaos from the feds before, and we've had cuts before, and times of bad finances and bad decisions. So I don't really see this as uncharted for us. It's just different than it was for the past 15 years in Michigan, where we've had legislative kind of agreement, like Darrin mentioned, that both chambers kind of go at the same time. And we've been blessed to get done before July 1st, and I still think that's the wisest, best course of action, particularly for school funding. I guess, you know, with all the federal chaos and what's going to happen there, I just say, let's take the opportunity then to be able to do something better. Whether the feds are doing a good job or not, we should always be trying to labor for something better, to do a better job. If the feds are going to give us these dollars that used to come through the Department of Ed in block grants, let's make sure that we work together to make sure they get to where we need them to be, especially the special ed dollars that we get from the department are really critical. Now, there's some dollars that come from the Department of Ed to our department that I think are totally wasted. I mean, they take a huge chunk of that to our Department of Ed to use for administrative purposes and send people around in cars to check on school lunch programs. And so I think there's plenty of opportunity there to do a better job with some of these dollars anyway. So let's take the opportunity, let's do something. But I'm more focused on long-term policy of delivering education than I am focused on the budget. I'm not on the Appropriations Committee. I find money to be kind of boring. It's the dairy farmer in me. We don't have any. So I'm much more interested in the policy issues, you know, about how do we make education more stable in Michigan going forward, and how do we get together. I think one of the critical things we can do is have more legislators who've got teaching experience. It's not that the ones who don't care, they do, but they need to listen to the people who've got teaching experience. And I think we also need to kind of take the blinders off from our own individual parties, from the groups that are constantly advocating on education. Because whether it's the MEA, the AFT, which you and I both paid dues to one of those two organizations, I assume, I did, so I assume you did too, you know, or whether it's GLEP or Education Midwest, you know, all these advocacy groups, we have a tendency to kind of get in our tower, our team, and say, that group's anti-education. And really, from what I've seen over my time, they're not. The MEA is not anti-education, but they do have a certain perspective of how they look at things. But the people who are members care about the students. And GLEP is not anti-education, as much as I've had my run-ins with them and disagreed, and they even sponsored my opponent in one of my elections. They care about kids and education too. And everybody's kind of talking about their circle of what they're looking at and not talking about the things that fall outside their perspective. They just want to solve the problem as they see it. And it's up to policymakers to kind of tear down those walls and take those messages and stop just trying to bolster their team's argument instead of trying to take the best of all those worlds and create a collective solution.
That's beautifully put. We're going to open it up to questions, but I just have to say that's Skillman's perspective. That's people-powered education. We fund a lot of the nonprofit organizations that you mentioned. We fund a lot of powerful organizers. We align ourselves with everyone because we know there's multiple truths. At any given time, they're all valid, and we all want to help young people. And actually, we need all of us to push ourselves forward. Are there any questions today? We have a question right here in front.
Hi, I'm Erin Skeen-Pratt. I'm with the Michigan After School Partnership, and we are really working to ensure that all youth have access to quality out-of-school time programs, so before, after, and summer. And we've been really fortunate the last 4 years, thanks so much to your support, Senator, as well as really bipartisan support from Senator Albert and the governor, going from zero investment to after school to $57 million this past year. And although we are so grateful for that, we know that there's still such a need. For the $57 million, there was still $122 million in asks. And we know that there are hundreds of thousands of kids who would take part in one of these programs if it was available to them. Do you see a path forward for a bipartisan type solution that would look at where we can get to, really making sure that, again, all kids have access to these important programs?
I would like to, yes. I think out-of-school time and after-school programs, before and after-school programs, are critical for the full foundation of an education for a kid. When you're thinking about, obviously, all the academic components of a child's education, that's all so important, but it's also all these other skills that you can learn along the way. In the time that you spend in the summer or before and after school, you're learning career tech stuff sometimes, you're doing other types of projects that you may not get inside of a school. That's why we've invested so much in the last few years. And in the budget we just passed, over $90 million into that line. And so we're trying to get as much as we can to really boost up these programs. And my hope is that we can do more. I mean, the vision that I would like to see is that every kid can go into a summer program across the state. No matter where you live, no matter your income, it is just a free summer program for all kids in Michigan. It's a very expensive prospect, but it's something that I try to work towards, and putting these down payments now into the out-of-school time line, hopefully we'll get to that point at some point. And hopefully in my legislative career, I've got about 6 years left, so we'll see.
I'm hearing 90 million for out-of-school time. That's what I
90 million so far.
That's what I heard. Do we have a question over there?
We have to hold it. Okay, sorry. How's it going, everybody? Nando Felton here. As a current student and educator right now, I'm seeing a really big disconnect from industry to higher education to policy makers, local legislative and statewide, to actually address the issues in K through 12. There's a disconnect, like there is no communication. What do you see for the two senators on the panel today, and thank you for being here, as a way to kind of solve that issue or that problem, or where should we address or attack from?
Can you talk specifically about the types of disconnects you're referring to?
Yeah, so I work in the city of Detroit, and DPSCD doesn't really communicate with the city of Detroit as a whole. I think there's a disconnect in the way that we are getting students to want to be in the industry. I mean, Michigan is a huge exporter of not just products, but talent as well. How are we retaining that? We took out skills trades like the year I started high school, which wasn't that long ago, the 2012 when I started, they took out skills trade. So just trying to figure out the way that there's a big disconnect. And after COVID, the post-COVID kind of syndrome, I guess you could call it, is like this learning loss gap that occurred. Lots of things that have occurred. Where do you see as a way to kind of address that and to make sure we can bring these things to light? You have 6 years left, Senator. Ed, I think you're
Year and a half.
Year and a half. Maybe one day I could run for Senate. Maybe I could have an idea of where I could start to address those issues there. There's a lot of issues, but just kind of wanted your guys' input on that.
So I'm sorry to hear that you got this disconnect where you're at. So I guess I can share that I think the connection and the communication has never been stronger in the Upper Peninsula on these issues. Our communication with the skilled trades across the UP, putting on skilled trade events and days where kids get out of school and the schools bus them there to build something, to weld something, to see how linemen operate, how electricians put conduit in. I mean, we've got so many of these programs going on right now. It's just tremendous interaction between our schools and the skilled trades. Other job places right now are welcoming students in. Our community colleges, Northern, are all doing a tremendous job at making these connection points. So, I mean, I would encourage your area to, I mean, reach out to the skilled trades for certain, have them come talk to the guys in the UP if they need a crash course in how to do this. But I just see our connection points have never been stronger when it comes to this, through the leadership of university, community college, ISDs, local schools, the trades. One of the things, though, that I really think we could continue to push forward with to do a better job in Michigan is to look at the Colorado model. Colorado is allowing students to do paid internships their last 2 years of school. And it's just a tremendous program. It's something I've been trying to get through the legislature now for several years. And Colorado will tell you that, you know, the businesses will tell you the first year with the student, they're losing money, but the second year they're making money. And they love it. The students get to the end, and oftentimes the business is willing to pay for them to go on to get post-secondary education, to come back and be even better trained for the job. So we've got to change some of the hours that we allow students to leave the classroom right now in order to make that happen. Michigan has 50%, and we need to move that up to about 75%. So there's just a few tweaks that we have to make, and it's been difficult to get done, but that's one of the great things I think would really help us get there too, is if we provide those opportunities for the students.
And just, I'll add, so on the teacher pipeline work specifically,
Yeah, that's another.
we have spent significant resources from the state on when Republicans were in charge of the legislature and when Democrats were in charge of the legislature on supporting and maintaining our teacher pipeline. We've funded specific programs like Teach Michigan and others that have been very effective in supporting educators throughout their professional growth. And we're talking about the teacher fellowship program to make sure teachers are getting paid while they're student teaching.
Yes,
that was a huge bipartisan win.
Yeah.
So we're fixing some of those things now. We need to sustain them and grow them as we're seeing the effects actually pan out. We're starting to see an uptick in people becoming teachers again. That's because we're investing in the fellowship work now, in the pipeline work now. The old best recruitment tool for educators were educators themselves. They would tell their family and their friends to become teachers. That is not happening anymore. I don't know if you've talked to a lot of teachers, but they actually, unfortunately, are shying people away from the profession. And so we're counterbalancing people who don't believe that this profession is a long-term good professional outcome for themselves. So we're battling that and trying to really remind people that this is a good profession. However, there's a lot of work that we need to do to make sure that people who become teachers want to stay as teachers.
That's right.
We lose teachers in the first 2 to 5 years of their careers. And it's because your counterparts, the people that you see doing other jobs at the same level as you, with the same education as you, around the same age as you, are making significantly more dollars in their pocket, right? Like they are raising their salaries in the private sector to levels where the average teacher salary in Michigan is at the beginning of the career is $41,600. $41,600. When I started teaching in 2014, I made $38,000 as a starting teacher. It's been over 10 years, and that average wage has not changed much. That's a problem. I'm working on it. We're working on it. Hopefully we can see some of those outcomes shift.
We have a question over here. I see some hands up too over here. Yes.
Renina Shelby Crooms. I represent Bomber Group, a philanthropic organization here in Southeast Michigan. I'm going to stand on the side of you. And my question is regarding the Michigan Merit Curriculum. In 2022 or 2023, Michigan passed and the governor signed a bill requiring high school students complete a standalone financial literacy course. Many students are not able to take a standalone financial literacy course. In fact, only 2.3% of Michigan high school students are able to take that course because of the Michigan Merit Curriculum. And you said that often it pigeonholes students. So not only is it affecting students' ability to take what's legally required, a financial literacy course, but also the ability to participate in CTE activities. My question is there a path, or what is the potential of reforming the Michigan Merit Curriculum so that students can have these opportunities and take advantage of what's legally required in order for them to graduate, which is financial literacy?
I'm going to ask just one of you answer it so that we can popcorn out to some of the other questions that we have.
It's going to be a long and winding path to change the Michigan Merit Curriculum. I think that there's interest in it, and I hope that we can come to some sort of bipartisan agreement where everybody's on the same page, because the only way it's going to work is if we're all rowing in the same direction. And so I think we've chipped at it. We've tried different additions or subtractions of the Michigan Merit Curriculum. Maybe it's time for an overhaul. So I'd say let's stay tuned. I know there's some work happening with the Michigan Education Guarantee that I'll keep saying, and you'll all probably be wondering, what is he talking about? There will be more to come, but there are people who are working on this concept now.
I'll try to be really quick.
Okay.
I think that one thing I want to tell you is we did open up a lot to personalized curriculums, and a lot of schools have not fully leveraged or understood what a personalized curriculum will allow them to do. It's kind of a get out of merit curriculum jail free card, but you've got to get some expertise on how to do it. You've got to get some training on how to do it, but it is a pathway available. So I really want to encourage any school that's struggling with the merit curriculum and their students, look at the personalized curriculum, because that door is kind of the get out of jail card. Other than that, as the senator mentioned, it's going to be a long path. I don't know, it's not going to happen in my time, I don't expect. It's just a matter of, in my opinion, what are our options, right? Do we get tougher? Do we get weaker? Or do we provide options within it? And stop lying to ourselves and saying, well, we'll let kids take welding, but we have to pretend it's math in order for them to do it. We'll let kids take music, but they have to pretend it's foreign language to do it. Stop the lies and just be honest about it. Some kids are going to study welding. Some kids are going to study music. Some are going to study math. And let's stop trying to make everybody good at everything and help kids excel at what they're good at. And go on to a community of people who've got widespread expertise, a diversity of skills, rather than pretending we can make everybody perfectly able to go out into the rest of the world. Why make everybody have to learn a foreign language when we don't make everybody learn how to weld? That was dumb, and it's still dumb.
Thank you, Senator. Okay.
Good morning. Thank you, Angelique, for your leadership. I'm Trina Scott from Rocket Companies. My question is, we talk a lot about if it's post-secondary, career paths for technical careers versus college. I think we're missing the point of if our kids are at 11% reading rate, it doesn't matter what program we have. If they're not prepared to go into either pathways, how do we ensure that they have the proper skill sets, the core values of being able to read and to write in order to proceed into those programs, whatever pathway it is? So I'm curious from our senators, how are you all addressing that at a policy level?
So we have changed the directive on how to teach reading in the state of Michigan. We're now moving back to the science of reading. It's going to take a couple of years for full implementation, but the states that you're seeing with the best growth for literacy, it's not because they're holding back their third graders or some of these other punitive measures. It's because they've shifted the way that they're teaching reading. And we are now going to be on that same path as everybody else. We had this, big shift probably in the last 15, 20 years where everybody said, well, we got to teach reading in a different way because we're not meeting the best standards possible. And then when they did do that shift, our scores just kind of plummeted. And it's not that kids cannot read, it's reading for comprehension. That's the challenge. Like, we're not reading for comprehension, which is not exactly the way we talk about it in the media or in a lot of these circles. We just say, oh, kids can't read in Michigan, we're 41st in the nation. That's not exactly the full story.
Right.
And so we need to figure out how we're going to now implement this new science of reading curriculum across the board. And we just changed it through our dyslexia package that we passed last year, which will give us additional tools, not only to help kids with dyslexia, but to help all kids read better.
I think Darrin's right on with the science of reading. It's a great first step forward. However, I look at it too and say, we can't have silver bullet solutions. And we get too many people in Lansing looking for this magic curriculum that's going to solve the reading problem. And then we pass something and we ignore the schools that are already doing a good job. We ignore the schools that aren't having this problem. And we make them jump through a bunch of extra hoops now for some new program we started. And that's really frustrating to me. I think we need to really trust more of our locals to solve this problem by giving them the directive that they must solve it or face some sort of consequence. Or we'll provide additional assistance or something where it's needed rather than make everybody jump through the same hoop when they didn't have that problem. But I think the science of reading is a big step forward for sure. And I think we're teaching that to our teachers at college now and helping them understand how to deliver these services better. But we've got just one other problem, which I think we haven't really touched on, which I think is important, and that's why is education floundering to some extent? What is one of the factors, foundational factors for why education is floundering in Michigan and a lot of places? And that's that we still are teaching with a concept of culture and family stability that we've lost. So it's like, hey, it's still the 1950s, we'll run our schools this way, but the families and our communities are not structured that way anymore. And so when I get taken down to Detroit and visit with students, a couple of my colleagues have brought me down there over various times to meet with school leaders, and you find out that students are shifting schools every other week, they're somewhere else. They're not sleeping in the same bed. You know, every other week they're in a different home, they're in a different district, they have a different teacher. They don't know if they're gonna eat tonight. And if we don't address some of those problems, I don't know how we're gonna solve the reading problem. If we're not giving kids a safe place to grow up and eat. So I see I'm at 0 on the clock, so I better stop.
Well, actually, we're all at 0 on the clock. I was looking around because there were hands over here, and what I want to say is that, first of all, thank you to the senators. Thank you for this conversation. I feel like what we were able to have is actually the experience that we crave, which is to talk about things reasonably, to talk about complicated topics in ways that make sense, and to talk about real solutions. So thank you for doing that with us. We're going to continue this conversation. Skillman Foundation is launching a radio show with WJR and a podcast, and it will be the first Monday of every month at 7 p.m. It is called Our State of Education. And I'm looking around this room and I'm like, I want you on the show and you on the show, you on the show. This is my Oprah glow up moment that I'm looking forward to. But the whole point of it is that we want actually everyday folks that are proximate to education to be deeply involved in these conversations, to have substantive conversation across the aisle, because this is our moment in Michigan. And we believe that being Michigan strong means leading with common sense and finding a common purpose. And so that's what we're going to be up to every month. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you for talking about K through 12 later with Ballmer at 5 o'clock.
Distinguished